Welcome back everyone to Into the Paradox. I'm your host Peter Kennedy, and today we're tackling a concept that genuinely makes you question, well, everything. I mean, just recently, I overheard a discussion, quite a heated one actually, about Nigel Farage's surname. People were absolutely convinced it used to be spelled and pronounced differently, as if something had fundamentally shifted. It got me thinking, how real is the Mandela Effect? Is it just collective misremembering, or are we talking about something far more profound, like a dimension shift or even a collapse of reality as we know it?
That's a fantastic starting point, Peter, and it perfectly encapsulates the core of the Mandela Effect. As a folklore specialist, I see this pop up constantly in various forms. Essentially, the Mandela Effect describes a phenomenon where a large group of people share a false memory about past events or facts. The name, of course, comes from people incorrectly remembering Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, when in fact he was released and lived many more years to become president of South Africa.
And it's fascinating, isn't it? Because, well, Martin, from a psychological and sociological perspective, can explain a lot of how people collectively misremember. The intensity of conviction people have often goes beyond simple forgetfulness. The Nigel Farage example is perfect because it's so recent, yet people are already feeling that undeniable sense of no, that's not how it was. From an occult and esoteric standpoint, that's where things get really interesting. The idea that our reality might not be as fixed as we perceive it to be.
Exactly. The conviction is what gets me. It's not just, oh, I might be wrong. It's a genuine, almost visceral reaction of, I know this to be true, and yet the evidence says otherwise. So Martin, let's start with the more grounded explanations. What's going on in our brains when we experience something like this?
Well, Peter, from a cognitive psychology standpoint, there are several mechanisms at play. One of the primary ones is confabulation, which isn't lying, but rather the brain filling in gaps in memory with plausible, but incorrect, information. We reconstruct memories every time we recall them, and that reconstruction isn't always perfect. Then there's source memory error, where you remember a piece of information but forget where you learned it, or misattribute it. If you saw a parody of a famous scene, for instance, you might genuinely start to believe the parody was the original.
And the internet in a strange way amplifies this, doesn't it? Because once a false memory is seeded, it can spread like wildfire. If enough people share that new memory, it starts to gain a collective weight. But I often wonder if the internet is just a mirror, reflecting something deeper, rather than solely being the cause.
That's a good point, Tom. Let's dig into some of the classic examples because I think they help illustrate the phenomenon. Berenstain Bears, anyone?
The Berenstain Bears! A textbook case. So many people vividly remember the popular children's book series being spelled Berenstein, with an E as in Einstein. Yet, if you look at the books, it's always been Berenstein with an A. It's one of the most cited examples, and it baffles people. And it goes beyond simply misspelling a name. It feels like a fundamental change in something familiar.
Absolutely. Or the classic Luke, I am your father from Star Wars. So iconic, so ingrained in pop culture. But the line is actually, no, I am your father. It's a subtle difference, but one that millions swear changed. And then there's the Monopoly Man. Did he or did he not wear a monocle? A huge percentage of people recall him with one, but he never has.
I mean, I'm one of those people. I distinctly remember the Monopoly Man with a monocle. My mind is blown every time I see the official artwork without it. It's truly uncanny. So Martin, how do you explain the sheer number of people who share these specific false memories? Is it just coincidence, or is there something else at play, perhaps a collective unconscious, as Jung proposed?
That's a brilliant connection, Peter. While Jung's collective unconscious is more about shared archetypes and myths, the concept of a shared mental landscape does touch on it. In terms of memory, we often talk about schema theory. Our brains create mental frameworks, or schemas, to organize information. When we encounter something new, we try to fit it into an existing schema. So if we've seen enough wealthy, top-hat-wearing figures with monocles, our brain might automatically apply that monocle to the Monopoly Man schema, even if it wasn't there originally. And once a few people vocalize this shared error, it can create a social contagion effect, reinforcing the false memory in others who might be unsure.
But what if the schema itself is being manipulated, or is merely a reflection of a deeper, more fluid reality? This is where the dimension shift or collapse theories start to gain traction. Imagine for a moment that there are countless parallel universes, each with slight variations. Perhaps in one universe the Berenstain Bears were spelled with an E, or the Monopoly Man did wear a monocle. What if, for some unknown reason, our consciousness or even fragments of our reality are occasionally blipping between these closely related timelines?
Whoa, that's a wild thought. So we're not just misremembering, we're essentially remembering a different reality? How would that even work, Tom? Are we talking about quantum mechanics on a macroscopic scale here?
Precisely, Peter. While mainstream science is still grappling with the implications, some theories, often rooted in quantum physics, suggest that at a fundamental level, reality is probabilistic until observed. What if, on a grander scale, our collective consciousness is doing the observing and collapsing potential realities into a singular experience? And what if there's an occasional, even momentary, bleed-through from an adjacent probability?
It's certainly a compelling narrative, Tom, and it appeals to that deep human desire to understand the inexplicable. From a folklore perspective, these kinds of stories about shifting realities or glitches in the matrix have existed for centuries, though perhaps not framed in quantum terms. Changelings, fey folk altering reality, even trickster gods, they all play on the idea that our world might not be exactly as it seems. The Mandela Effect is almost a modern mythological framework for this ancient anxiety.
That's a brilliant way to put it, Martin. It's like a new myth for a scientific age. But let's push this dimension shift idea a bit further, Tom. If we are shifting, or if realities are collapsing, what would be the mechanism? Is it a gradual process or sudden jolts like a cosmic hiccup?
My personal leaning, and what many occult traditions hint at, is that it's probably more of a constant fluid process that occasionally manifests in noticeable jolts. Think of it like a river. Most of the time the flow is smooth, but sometimes there are eddies, rapids, or even a branch gets stuck, diverting the flow slightly. These Mandela effects could be those minor diversions where a significant portion of our collective consciousness, for whatever reason, momentarily aligns with a slightly different historical record or detail from a very close parallel timeline. Some theories even suggest that our increasing global connectivity, our shared attention, might paradoxically make us more susceptible to these collective jumps.
And from my side, I'd say that increased connectivity also means that once someone notices a discrepancy, like the Berenstain Bears, the idea spreads instantly. Before the internet, if you misremembered something, you might just shrug and move on. Now you post it online and suddenly thousands chime in, confirming your false memory, which then reinforces it further. It's a feedback loop, isn't it?
It absolutely is. But there are some Mandela effects that feel harder to explain by mere psychological phenomena, like the specific details of historical events or even geography. Didn't some people claim New Zealand was in a different place on the map?
Indeed. Or the Fruit Loops cereal. Many people are convinced it used to be spelled Fruit Loops. Another classic is the Queen song We Are the Champions. Most people recall Freddie Mercury singing No Time for Losers 'cause we are the champions of the world, with of the world at the very end. But in the original studio version, it actually cuts off after champions. That extra phrase only appears in live performances or covers. The collective memory seems to merge the two versions.
That's a perfect example of memory blending, Tom. Our brains aren't perfect recorders. They're editors and synthesizers. We hear of the world in other contexts, or it just feels right as a triumphant conclusion, so our memory fills it in. It's often the most plausible or most satisfying version that gets cemented. And regarding New Zealand, I think that's often tied to general geographical illiteracy combined with confirmation bias. If someone says New Zealand moved, and you're already a bit shaky on world geography, it's easier to believe than to admit you just weren't paying attention.
Fair enough, Martin. But then what about something like the Looney Tunes versus Looney Tunes? I mean, tunes refers to melodies, which makes sense for cartoons, but tunes just feels more cartoony, almost like cartoons itself. And so many remember tunes.
And that's where the overlap becomes truly intriguing. Is it simply a spelling error, or is there a subtle linguistic shift that occurred in a different timeline and we're picking up on the echoes of it? From an esoteric perspective, words carry power. A slight alteration in a commonly known word, especially one associated with a shared cultural touchstone, could be interpreted as a ripple effect from a minor timeline divergence. It's like the universe is slightly recalibrating and we're picking up on the Chuksham errors.
It's a beautiful metaphor, Tom, and I think that's why these discussions resonate so deeply with people. It taps into a fundamental human need to make sense of the world, especially when it seems to defy our internal records. Whether it's psychological or metaphysical, the Mandela Effect highlights the incredible malleability of human memory and perception.
So, circling back to our initial spark, the Nigel Farage surname, is it just a common mispronunciation, or the kind of subtle linguistic shift Tom alluded to? Or something else entirely?
With Farage, I think it's likely a combination of factors. Names can be tricky, especially those with less common pronunciations. It's easy for the brain to normalize it to something more familiar. Plus, there might be regional variations in how people typically say it, leading to a kind of auditory Chinese whispers effect over time. And once a wrong pronunciation or spelling gains traction socially, it's very hard to dislodge.
I'd agree with Martin on the surface level explanation, but I'd also add, why this name now? Could it be that the heightened political landscape, the intensity of discourse, is creating more of these fluctuations? When collective attention is so focused and emotional, perhaps it creates tiny ripples in the fabric of what we perceive as fixed. It's like the universe is blinking a bit faster under stress.
That's a really interesting thought, Tom, that collective emotional energy might have an impact. So we've got the psychological, the sociological, and the truly esoteric. Martin, if you had to put a percentage on it, what percentage of Mandela effects do you think are purely psychological versus potentially something more?
Honestly, Peter, I'd say a very high percentage, probably over 90%, can be convincingly explained by known psychological and cognitive biases. Our brains are incredible, but they're not infallible. They prioritize efficiency over absolute accuracy in many cases. So phenomena like confabulation, source memory errors, and social reinforcement are powerful forces. That being said, the remaining few percentage points, well, those are the ones that keep the conversation alive and pique our curiosity, aren't they?
And it's in those remaining few percentage points, Peter, that we find the fertile ground for deeper exploration. Even if it's a small fraction, the very fact that people are so utterly convinced, so deeply feeling that a change has occurred, speaks volumes. Whether it's a true dimension shift or simply the human mind's profound ability to create its own reality, it challenges our comfortable assumptions about objective truth. It forces us to ask, what if the Matrix does have glitches? What if our perception is indeed a window into something far more complex and fluid than we dare to imagine?
It certainly does, and it leaves us with more questions than answers, which, frankly, is often the best outcome for a discussion like this. We've explored the very fabric of memory, perception, and potentially reality itself. Whether you lean towards the psychological explanations or the more esoteric theories of dimension shifts and reality collapses, the Mandela Effect is a fascinating paradox that continues to challenge our understanding of what's real. Thank you both, Martin and Tom, for such an enlightening conversation. And to our listeners, keep questioning, keep observing, and maybe double-check those childhood book titles. You might be surprised by what you find. Join us next time on Into the Paradox.